Hello and welcome back to the Conquest of Bliss. I am here with the lovely Becca Switzer. Is that pronounced right?
That's right. It's not Schweitzer,
Okay,
just like Switzerland. You got it.
perfect. So, how are you today, Becca?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm enjoying a beautiful day in Colorado. We call it Pleasantville, USA, where I live. It's like 70 degrees every day, birds chirping, sun shining. So things are going well.
70 degrees. So, that's I think 20 ish here. I don't really know.
Oh,
I'm
you're on that
guessing.
Celsius
Um,
game.
I sure am up here in the sea to the Canada, which is a reference to John LaJoie, who nobody will know, but that's
I
okay.
don't know who that is, but I am Canadian myself. But I was born in Newfoundland,
No
Canada. Yeah,
way!
who knew? That's
Newfoundland?
right.
You're a new. Oh, that's so cool. That's
I am a
that's so
foreign
exciting to me.
alien. Yeah.
So you've clearly not been in Newfoundland for quite a while. Or you'd be able to hear. You'd be able to hear it.
Oh yeah, you'd be able to hear. I have a recording on my phone. So very long story short, my parents moved to the States when I was 6 years old, and I was super Canadian, of course, when I arrived in the States. And kids were like, "What is this Martian doing here?" Asked me what it's like to live in an igloo, things of that nature, kids.
Of
Uh,
course, as one does.
yeah, and so by no fault of my own, it's a bunch of just family chaos and drama. But I really didn't get to go back to Canada until I was an adult. And so I recently, just over the summer, went to visit my grandparents and my aunts and uncles in Newfoundland, and I recorded them having a conversation on my phone, and I play it just like a 60-second clip for my friends. And I'm like, if you can guess what they're talking about, I will give you $100. And they're like, what are they saying?
It's so fantastic.
It's
It's
great.
like, oh, I mean, I love Newfie accents. Obviously, our accents are not nearly as difficult to understand,
Right.
but I just love Newfie accents because it's kind of like Irish,
Yeah.
and then it's kind of like a maritime accent, and
Yeah.
it's like kind of its own thing, and it's just fantastic. So
It is.
that's cool. So this is the beauty of not talking to people much before I interview them, is that I get to learn new things on the podcast.
That's right. We
So
like it. It's exploration.
the reason that I invited you to here today, as you know, is I saw you on a different podcast, and I just thought, dang, that girl has so much to say. So, so can you tell us a little bit about your journey and what led you to be dangable?
Dangable. Wow. Well, my life started just like anyone else's life when I came screaming into planet Earth as a little meatball, shitting myself and crying and totally helpless, right? And I guess as I began to go into adulthood, I definitely started becoming more introspective about my own human experience. And I think one of the biggest, I got married when I was 21. And
Oh wow.
like the first person I'd ever been with, we met when I was 19. We got married when I was 21. We were together total for 8.5 years. So we were married for 6.5 years. And during that time, you know how much takes place between age of 19 and even 25 or 30. Like you just
Yep.
completely turn into a different person, right? And so I think I really struggled with my own humanness during that time. I wasn't happy in my marriage. I also grew up in with a very tumultuous childhood. My mother has borderline personality disorder, and like it was just chaos and like anger and screaming and violence and invalidating feelings. And my childhood was a little bit fucked up.
Mhm.
So I don't think I processed a lot of those emotions and feelings, and I never really learned to get in touch with how I was really feeling or how to express those. So through the process of getting married and then building a business with this person, but then realizing like I was actually deeply unfulfilled, I kind of had
Mhm.
my like dark night of the soul moment, right? Like I ended up getting divorced, and then that totally broke me down into nothingness. Like I was just such an absolute wreck that I had to turn to like, okay, I need to figure out how to be, like how to cope, how to accept feelings, like what is going on right now. I'd never felt that bad in my entire life. And so through that process, I really, over the last few years, I'm continuing to gain, I shouldn't say I've gained a great understanding, but I have gained a lot of insight on what it means to choose your own way and what joy really is and what accepting your feelings is and all of that. So it's really, I feel like my journey right now is about just the authentic human experience and really sharing that message from what I'm learning to help people alleviate their own suffering and enjoy the present moment. And these are all loaded terms that you hear when you read books or you have spiritual teachers, right? Or you listen to meditations. And I think all of those what have become almost cliche phrases are finally really sinking in, and I'm really reveling in the opportunity to experience those fully with my own human experience. So that's where I'm at.
That's fantastic. So, oh, you said so many interesting things, and I'm like, ooh, what do I start with? I mean, I'll start with the simplest. Yeah, cliches. Cliches are cool because cliches are cliches for a reason. It doesn't always mean that they're 100% true. Some of them are, some of them aren't, but they're always true to someone's experience. They're so interesting because
Yeah,
like if enough people say something to become a cliche, like there's
there's got to
something
be
to it,
something to it.
regardless of, Sorry, can you say that again?
I said, yeah, there's got to be something to it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So okay, so you said so many things and it's so interesting. Marrying young, I can't imagine. But okay, the big thing that stuck out to me is you talked about your mom having BPD,
Yeah.
and that is that is really really interesting and extremely challenging. So, do you? If this is too personal, just let me know.
There's no such
Um,
thing. You can ask and you shall receive.
so, would you say now you have like have you been able to reconcile your relationship with your mom or?
No, so I actually haven't been in contact with my parents in over 6 years. Uh,
Oh, okay.
it's it's a complicated situation with them. Like I have you ever seen the movie Mommy Dearest?
I haven't seen the movie, but I know the basic idea of
Okay.
it.
Well, sometime when you're bored, look up the video, the no wire hangers, and that's like the energy of my mom, unfortunately. And now that I'm older, I'm able to have compassion. Like I understand that she's so disconnected from herself, and she lives such a fear-based life that she has to be cruel to other people. Like she makes everybody else responsible for her own unhappiness. And
Hmm.
and my dad was just my dad's an interesting one to crack. He's very, very intelligent, and he can be a good person. But growing up in my household, it was like my father had to be just do everything he could to not trigger my mom, or just like it. And she's triggered all the time, right? So there's really
Yeah.
no avoiding that. So it's two human beings that, while I'm biologically related to, they don't have any interest or consciousness to take responsibility for their own actions or feelings. And so when you're in a
Hmm.
situation like that, it's not possible to have a relationship with them. And so eventually I just
Hmm.
decided it's better for me to not have them in my life. Like you have to make those tough decisions sometimes. I don't really feel that I have negative energy surrounding it anymore. Like when I think about them, I don't get like physical feelings in my body, which I used to get really, really angry. But now it's just like, I've cut that cord and my life is just so much better without that burden. So yeah, that's kind of where it's
Totally,
at.
totally. Yeah, and it's a lot of the things that you said. A lot of the things that you said, I feel like I said that all as one word.
It
A lot
is.
of the things you said were were really really powerful. I think a lot of people struggle with knowing what to do. Like, I mean, really, every time we interact with people, it's a balance of compassion and boundaries, right? We have to figure out where that fits in, and sometimes the boundaries have to be bigger and the compassion less, and sometimes more compassion and less boundaries, just depending on the person that you're interacting with. But what what I find interesting, I don't know if that's the right word, is like, because I have had difficulties with my family, and I went the other way, not because, well, because I was able to, really,
Yeah.
is what it comes down to. I mean, I think that you really hit the nail on the head, where some people just, they don't have the capacity to have that equal exchange of energy that a relationship depends on.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be direct one to one, but especially when there's enabling going on, and things like that.
Yeah.
And you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
Right.
You know. So you were talking about the freedom that comes with reminding yourself you don't owe anyone your love and energy.
Right.
That's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So, like, have you, leading up to that, had you had any experiences with that, with setting a hard boundary leading up to the 6 years ago, or was that really the first time that you had to set that kind of a boundary?
Well, so I would have been 24, 25 at that time when I said I'm out of here, right? And up until
Mm-hmm.
then, I mean, I relied on, when you're a teenager and you're a child and you live with your family, you rely on them. I mean, they take care of you, right? Even if they're not
Mm-hmm.
emotionally taking care of you, they put a roof over your head and they pay for you to
Keep you alive.
they keep you alive, right? Right. And so when I turned 18, I left and went to college, and I went to college for like 2 years, and then I ended up dropping out, met my former husband doing sales, and then we traveled around the country. So I had this kind of separation where I became old enough to leave the nest, and I started busting my ass to make money and make sure I could take care of myself, and I didn't have to rely on my parents anymore. And that distance, I mean, that allowed me to just be separate from it because I wasn't living in the circus tent that was my family's home. Um, but then we started, at the time, again, my former husband and I, like, we would start to go and do holidays with my parents and stuff like that. And it would just, there's always some drama or explosion or violent event or something. And it was like, okay, uh, even if I separate myself, like, this is a long story. I'm not going to get into the whole story unless you really want to. But in the long and the short of it, at the time, it was Christmas was the last time I saw my family, including my brother. I have a brother that's a year younger than me, and my brother physically assaulted me in front of my mom because I was playing Christmas carols at 6:30 p.m. in the basement where his room is because I was wrapping presents. He came out and like attacked me, and my parents totally invalidated the whole thing, like told me it was my fault. Like, you shouldn't have been playing music, stuff like that. And it was that moment where my ex-husband looked at me and he just goes, are you kidding me? Like, how do these people think like this? And it was just a moment like that where I go, there's nothing any of us can do here in this scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is just not something that, there's no such thing as boundaries in that situation. Like, there's just removing yourself from the situation. So that's kind of how the direction it had to go. And they never tried to contact me. My parents, my dad called me this Christmas and left a voicemail, and that was the first I'd heard from them in like 6 years. So,
wow.
yeah, it's
Well,
interesting.
and I mean,
not a woe is me story. I also want to just insert.
I didn't take it as woe is me at all.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, like you made a good point is sometimes like other types of boundaries don't work, and the boundary has to be a hard line, like no more contact.
Right.
And I think and maybe this is just me because I'm like an eternal like optimist, like what's a way to frame this that's sort of positive and stuff. But I think that sometimes it's kinder to the person that you have to set that kind of a boundary with to set it to. Because like for me, for example, like I've had situations where I've had to cut people out of my life for different reasons.
Yeah.
And as much as I may have been from some angles or whatever you want to call it, like like a victim in the sense that someone was doing something overtly wrong and I was doing something different,
right?
Like like where I was on the receiving end, whatever that happens to be. I think that not only is it good to step away from that being enabled so that they can learn and stuff, but it's also it creates, at least for me, I can only speak to my experience, but like a bitterness and an anger inside of me, and then eventually you do like lash out back, or at the very least it people, it's palpable when you have bad or angry feelings towards someone. It's palpable for them and it's uncomfortable for them as well.
Yeah.
So in some ways it's kinder, even if they're the one doing the wrong and we know that, in some ways it's kinder to go, you know what, if you're going to live your life, I'm just going to let you do what you're going to do, and I don't know any other way to do that but then to step away.
Right.
And like you talked about, which I thought was really cool, is you don't harbor that resentment anymore and that anger anymore.
Right.
Which I would say probably, and correct me if I'm wrong, allows you to hold more love in your heart for them from a distance with a different way, which is really empowering to you. And if you believe any of the hippy dippy shit that I believe, is empowering from a distance to them as well.
Yeah, I think that in order for two people have to genuinely care about each other, despite the differences or the conflicts, for there to be boundaries at work, right? Like both parties
Absolutely.
have to be invested in it. I don't think there's such thing as
respect.
Respect, genuine care, compassion. Without that, and when you have somebody who has a personality disorder where like that something isn't connecting in that person, right? Their heart and their mind aren't connecting in that way. And it's almost like they're incapable. Gosh, I hate to say that, but it's like they're incapable of genuinely feeling those feelings.
Hmm.
And so with that, I don't think that without two people that care enough about the relationship to set boundaries that say, okay, I understand that some of my behaviors or the things that I do cause you to feel this way. And while I can't stop doing them, I understand that it hurts you. And you set that boundary for them, and you can still have some sort of a relationship, right?
Yeah.
But without that, I don't think that's possible. And to answer your question, loving them from afar, I don't know that I can say yet that I feel genuine love toward my parents, and that's
Yeah.
just
Okay.
totally admitting how I feel. I feel indifference, I think. Um,
Okay.
I think I can feel compassion for like understanding that people who behave that way are behaving that way not because of me, but because they're so disconnected from love, right?
Hmm.
And for that, I feel bad. I feel terrible for, geez, my mom lives such a disconnected, angry life.
Yeah.
And I feel bad for her because she's missing out on relationships and connection and depth and all of those things. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. I think I understand, and I'm just gonna try and clarify because that's what it's all about. So I think that we might just be using the word love differently,
yeah,
because I don't necessarily mean love in an affectionate, endearing sense, but kind of what you were describing is you feel compassion, you can see the disconnect and where it comes from, and hope for the best for them. So I guess I
yeah,
kind of mean in the agape sort of love for the world and mankind way, as
right.
opposed to a specific, like, you have a special place in my heart kind of love. So,
Absolutely. Well, and with that, Kara, I love that you said that because from that, there's a million ways to define love, right? In the Bible, it says love is patient, love is kind, it does not boast, all those
I
things,
love that.
right?
Keep no record
Corinthians,
of wrongs.
right? And so I think that when I think about the definition of like, and I love that you said agape because agape love, non-romantic love, right? Not even familial. It's just like love and acceptance. I see that as total acceptance and allowing of the expression of everything in the world. And it
Hmm.
removes the judgment of good or bad. So
Yes,
if,
exactly.
right? So I could look at, so for example, is a forest fire bad? Some people
Well,
would
it
say
puts
that it,
nitrogen in the soil.
right, like Earth doesn't go, oh shit, forest fire, right? Like we judge it as bad in one context, but in the other context it's necessary to clear out old brush and let new, right, the soil be renewed and let sun come down to the earth again, and it's really necessary in some aspects, right? And so there's these good and bad things in life. One of my favorite quotes is William Shakespeare, which says, "Nothing is good or bad; only thinking makes it so." And it reminds me of another quote. Gosh, I can't. Is it Steve Maraboli? There's another quote that says something like, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he says, "When you realize that everything and everyone that has entered your life up until this point has created you to be the person that you be, you realize that there's nothing to forgive because everything happened for a reason, right?" And so if I could look at something like a relationship with my parents and go, they're bad people and those were bad experiences, and I didn't enjoy the experiences, but if I called them bad, I'm taking away from what they've molded me into be today. Like, how could I gain the perspective or the knowledge that I have without going through those tumultuous times? So,
Hmm.
love and acceptance is just, oh, I love that it just is. Like, this was my
Yes.
environment, and here I am. Cool. Right? It's not good or bad.
Absolutely. And in I believe it's DBT, but I don't know. My therapist said um, that type of thinking that you're describing that I also try to use is called the celebration technique,
Okay.
and that's to it's to accept that, yeah, there may have been trauma, there may have been bad things that are associated with something, but you can still celebrate, and it's encouraged that you still celebrate what came of that was good in
Right.
some form or another. And I have lots of experiences like that too.
Yeah.
And one of the really cool things that I like, I think about this a lot. And one of the really cool things that I have noticed about using this type of thinking, this stepping back and viewing it from as neutral, like, still validating your own feelings and allowing yourself to make the decisions you need to based on what your emotions are telling you and stuff, but trying to observe it from a neutral point of view, is it's a win-win situation.
Yes.
Then you're always winning. Every bad thing that happens to you is good for the whole, and every good thing that happens to you is good for the whole. And no matter what you do, you're always ahead.
Yes, exactly. And this reminds me of, it's called The Tale of the Taoist Farmer. Have you ever heard it?
I haven't.
So
please tell me.
I love it. It will change your life if you constantly remember it and apply it to your life. So there's this story of this farmer, and he has a couple of horses that break out of the farm one day and they run off. And the villagers and his friends are like, dang, what a bummer, right? How unfortunate. And he goes, maybe. And a couple days later, his horses come back with 10 wild horses. And now he has 10 more horses. And people are like, that's awesome. And he goes, maybe. And then his son goes out to tend to the horses and is trying to break these horses. And one of the wild horses kicks him and breaks his leg. And the villagers go, oh, how unfortunate. And he goes, maybe. But then there's a war happening and the government comes to draft his son for the war, right? And he's going to have to be a soldier, but his leg is broken, so they don't draft him. And people go, that's what a blessing. And he goes, maybe, right? And so if you look at everything that happens around us in the universe, in our lives, okay, it's never ending. There are not hard edges or starting and stopping points. Everything is just happening. It's interconnected. So nothing is good or bad. Like if you zoom in on this micro moment, like, oh, I'm getting divorced. This is terrible. And you zoom in with a microscope on that moment, you can judge it and say, well, it's bad. But if you zoom out and you realize that allowed you to meet your absolute soulmate 3 years later, then you go, oh my, what a blessing. Maybe.
Yeah, thank God I had to go through all that pain.
Right? Exactly. And think about birth. Birth is absolute pain. People say the worst pain a woman could ever feel is labor, right? But what comes out of it is new life, right? So you can use everything is everything. That's something I've realized, like when it comes to laws of the universe, everything applies. There's these universal laws and truths. And so you think about anything new that has to come requires death to precede it in every way, right?
Yes.
So.
Absolutely. You've said so many good things. Okay. This is what happens. I get all flustered and then I have to breathe because then I get
take a breath.
Too excited. So one of the things that you said that, I mean, you didn't say anything I don't agree with, which is cool. I wanted to comment on the starting and stopping points. That is why writing is so hard.
Yeah.
That's why it's so hard to write. Even if you're not writing like a fiction or like a story, it's so hard to figure out, like, where do you start? Where does this journey really begin? Like the journey really, like, and that's one of the things I appreciated is you're like, I started by, you didn't, I don't know exactly how you phrased it, but by being born. And and I love that because most people don't start the story there, but that's really true.
Yeah.
And you're talking about zooming out and I mean, the terms that I try to use when I look at an individual situation, because we need, to some degree, we need to be able to apply like right and wrong, to make decisions, what is, or the most right or whatever. Usually what I say is helpful and harmful.
Yeah.
Is this going to be helpful or harmful? And that's kind of how I try to judge for myself. And I get it wrong, sometimes, but yeah, I mean, it's so interesting how exactly what you're talking about is, in my experience, at the very least, so true. Because everything that hurts leads to something good. Maybe it leads to more pain, which then leads to something good, but it leads to something good in my experience.
Absolutely. Well, and I think about, when I got divorced, that was the grieving process was something I was not prepared for in any way. Like, I was like, what is happening to me? I was so unprepared for it because I was the one that had chosen to leave and like I wasn't happy, right? And then when it happened, I mean, for more than a year, maybe 15 months or something, I was a fucking wreck. And I mean, literally, life meant nothing to me. I just couldn't wait to die. And I hate to say that, but I mean, I found myself constantly just sobbing and being like, it's not fair that I have to be here. Like, I don't want to be here anymore is what I kept like saying. It
Mhm.
was a very dark point in my life. But that period completely broke me open and made me so compassionate and intuitive and empathetic to other people that now my capacity to love and to feel for other people and to connect with other people, there's no way that I would be able to express myself the way I'm expressing myself right now, to learn the lessons that I've learned and to have the capacity to have love for others like I do now without being completely broken down into nothingness because I had to rise from the ashes like a phoenix, right? And so without that experience, I would have just been bopping around still, kind of not awake in that way. Like it required that death, that part of me to die and to see that, oh, there's more here, right? So pain is not bad, it's a gift. And I think where people suffer is they get attached to their pain, right?
Mhm.
So, not saying it to, if you experience your pain fully and you let that show you what it has to show you and you come out on the other side, you're going to be better for it.
Yeah. I yes, I was I just love what you're saying so much because I mean Andre and I actually who connected us or
Yeah.
whatever. We did a whole episode called The Light and the Darkness that was about exactly that. It was about how like pain is there to teach you something,
Yes.
and it's even like if you're able to step outside of the idea that pain isn't fair, you know, that I shouldn't be experiencing this. If you're
Yes.
able to step outside of that idea and just observe, like first of all, it's incredibly interesting
Yes.
because you're like, you know, like whether it's physical or emotional pain, it's like what is going on and you can explore it and it's like this it's like a novel or something where you can just
Yes.
really dive into it. And then the other thing is it's very it's also, you know, the best way to see non-pain is to compare it to pain, but it's also very like beautiful in its way,
Yes.
you know, where it's something that you're never going to see when you're not in pain, where it's like these emotions, this creativity that exists. I mean, comedians are a great
Yes.
example.
Music.
uh, and it yeah, like it's this huge beautiful driving force that leads us to places that we just wouldn't go otherwise.
Right.
and and we are taught, and I understand why, but we're taught that like we shouldn't have pain, this isn't fair, you know, like I mean I have chronic pain issues with fibromyalgia and sarcoidosis, but a bunch of stuff doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But you know I spent a long time in the why me, you know, because these
Right.
are basically like random, they just kind of like you don't know like you can two people can do almost exactly the same thing and one will end up with fibromyalgia and one won't, you know,
Yeah.
so it's interesting. So, like I said, I spent so much time, you know, hating my pain, and I wouldn't say that I enjoy it, like you mentioned earlier, with the difficult times. But at the same time, I can really I can see beauty in it. I can definitely see ways that my pain has led me to, you know, and the only reason I can do the podcast is because I am disabled
Yeah.
and, you know, am you know stuck at home anyways, more or less, right? Like working a regular job doesn't work because of my many disabilities and stuff, you know, so there's an easy line to draw where it's freed me up to do a lot of things. But even beyond that, the pain itself, it's so interesting, you know,
Yes.
trying to find patterns in it and why is this happening and what like anyways, I could go on for a while, but that's not the point. I'm here to talk to you.
Well, I love what you're saying right now because I've had similar revelations recently where I'm like, what? So my first real heartbreak with my divorce, right?
Hmm.
That was like the deepest emotional pain that I've ever allowed myself to feel at the time. And so, but I really struggled against that pain. Well, when it happened the next time, right? You have more relationships and more breakups, and I was met with those similar emotions. I was like, okay, I have a totally different person. First of all, I know that I'm going to be okay because I've been through this before, right?
Hmm.
And now I have a totally different way to perceive it. And instead of struggling against it, I really, for the first time, allowed myself to feel my feelings without judging them without attaching
Mhm.
thoughts to them. See, that's the thing. And I actually just made a video about this today. Feelings are like waves. They
Mhm.
rise up and then they have this precipice point where it's like, oh, they max out and then they dissipate, right? No feeling
Yep.
lasts forever, okay? So, but what happens is we either try to suppress the feeling, but it's still there, poking, trying to get in there, right? Or we start to feel it, and instead of just breathing through, feeling your feelings, and then just letting them process through you, like a strainer,
Mhm.
pouring water in a strainer, just let it go through, we dam it up with our thoughts and we attach these thoughts to it. We try to solve our pain, we try to resist it, we try to blame it, project it, right? Blame the other person, we'll make them responsible for my pain, right? And so if instead you can sit there and you go, whoa, interesting that I'm feeling this way. Like, this is intense. I did that for the first time maybe just a couple months ago. It's so interesting that you just said that, but I was like, whoa. And I'm there like sobbing, right? Like, it was like wiping snot from my face, was like bawling. And I was like, this is awesome that I get to experience what this feels like. Because
Mhm.
the human experience is just that, it's just experience. We go, just like William Shakespeare says, we decide that certain things are good or bad, and because of that, we create suffering. So if we call our pain bad, instead of just feeling it and letting it go, and then feeling it again and letting it go, we attach thoughts to it and we let it, we think about it, we think about it, we think about it, and that it's like a dam. So instead of letting the water pass through like a strainer, we dam it until there's all this pressure, and eventually it just explodes and ruins us, right? So getting curious about your pain and just really looking at it and just sitting there with it. You know, Thich Nhat Hanh says, feel your pain, be there for it, cradle it like a little baby. You know, like, I'm here for you, and you just let it be. And then it goes away. And then it doesn't mean that there's not going to be another wave after that one. The ocean's full of them. You're constantly going to have these waves of feeling, but being curious about your pain and just allowing it to be without deciding it's good or bad is the only way to process it and heal from it.
Absolutely, 100%. And so you, okay, Kara. See, this is what happens. Um,
It's okay.
so,
I'm
um,
also throwing like 8-minute monologues at you. So,
it's okay. It's okay. So yeah, first things first. I that happens to me all the time now where like I'm talking about something and it might be something that I know that I have like some thoughts about or whatever, but like I'm just talking and then all of a sudden I'm crying and there's like tears streaming down my face and I'm like, "Oh, didn't expect that."
right,
Um,
exactly.
and what came to my mind as you were talking was the noting technique in meditation. Are you familiar with it?
Noting. I don't know.
So basically, it's the idea that as thoughts or feelings, and you use it while you're meditating, but of course you can meditate throughout life. It doesn't have to be sitting saying Om, right? Um, so you use it as you're meditating, and basically, as thoughts and feelings come into your mind, and they will, you just go, "Oh, that's a feeling." You
Interesting.
know, oh, that's a thought.
Right.
And basically they use the metaphor in the Headspace app, which is super cool. If anyone wants to check it out, I know they have a free version. I have no idea what it includes. But they talk about using a feather, like imagining that you're touching it with a feather, going, oh, like you're just observing it and
Acknowledge.
letting it come into your mind,
Right.
right? Because like, and I'm no psychologist, but when I think about intrusive thoughts versus like regular thoughts, I think the difference is that we give intrusive thoughts more weight
Right.
because we all, we've all walked across a bridge and gone, what would happen if I jumped off that? Because the brain is a
Right.
fucking maniac, right?
right. Yeah.
Um,
What if I
and
just drove off the
it's
road?
curious about all sorts of stuff that is terrifying.
That's right.
And so, the only time it's bothersome is when we go, what the fuck just happened? Why am I thinking about jumping off the bridge? Oh my God, I'm thinking about jumping off that bridge. Am I suicidal? What is going
Right.
on? And when we start really, really clinging on to our thoughts really hard, then they snowball.
Right.
Right. And I mean, they say that feelings last for, I don't know. I'm just throwing a number out there, but it's between like 10 seconds and 2 minutes. Like it's a super short period of time that the
Yeah.
actual physical reaction to the emotion comes. But then we re-trigger it, right? We're
Bingo.
like, oh, I'm sad, or oh, I'm suicidal. That's a great example of walking across that bridge. Your brain just does the thing it does.
Right.
And you're like, well, shit, I'm suicidal. And then you start freaking out. You start
Right.
having anxiety and panicking. And oh my God, am I actually safe? And what if I fell into it? What if I decided to listen to it?
Right.
And all of that stuff. But obviously, you're not going to, because the fact that that scares you in the first place
Right.
tells you that that's not what you want to do.
Right.
You know, oh, sorry. I also go on 8-minute monologue, so
it's okay.
two of a kind.
That means you just got some good stuff coming. I 100% agree with everything you just said. It's like thoughts, your mind. Alan Watts talks a lot about this, where he's like, you know, if you sit there and you think about where are the thoughts coming from? Because when we have thoughts, are we really directing a lot of them? Of course, when I'm here speaking and I'm saying things to you, I'm an active participant in what I'm thinking and saying. But when you're just sitting there, think about when you're meditating, okay? And you sit there and you're like, I'm not going to think of anything. And then all of a sudden it's like, this, that, this, that. Remember what you did in 3rd grade when Stephanie made you feel stupid on the playground? And then you're like, I need to get more avocados at the store. Wait, do I have enough? And you're like, what the? And you're frustrated because you feel like you're not in control of those, because your mind is its own animal. The monkey brain, right? It's just like, it's constantly, it wants something to do. And that's why in meditation, the point is not to not do anything. You try to focus the mind on your breath or whatever, right? Or a mantra or whatever it is that you want to do. So, but the mind, if you identify with your mind, you're going to live a nightmare. You don't identify with it, you witness it. You know, so we're always talking about being a witness to your thoughts and your feelings. So what we are, and this goes back to what we really are, we're humans having a spiritual experience. Yes, that's a loaded phrase that everybody always uses. But what we really are is just consciousness. Everything that Kara is today, everything that Becca is today, is just this accumulation of thoughts, feelings, personality traits, experiences, and we're walking through this life going, I'm Becca, but I'm not. If you reduce me all the way down to what I really am, is I'm just aware, but I'm expressing all these things because I have all these external stimuli and life experiences and things like that that have made me collect this personality, right? So if we're just awareness, then everything else beyond I am, everything else beyond my eyes are open, literally and figuratively, and I'm seeing these experiences happen, anything beyond that is just the mind's opinion about it. It's all just judgments about it, right? So you just watch things rise in your mind. You witness the emotions that you feel, and you just go, huh, interesting. And sometimes it's like, whoa, interesting, mad grief right now. Whoa, I am broken in half right now. This is interesting. Or you witness your joy and you're like, oh, I'm so excited. But it's the what we call positive experiences and emotions, the things that feel good to us. We don't judge those. We just allow them to be. But we have such a hard time not struggling against what we call the negative experiences or emotions or thoughts, right? And that's where the trouble lies. So
well, and
take it away.
First thing that I kind of disagree, but maybe we do agree and we're just phrasing it differently because that seems to happen a lot, is I think that we do tend to judge positive experiences, and we judge it through a lens of fear, where something good is happening. And I mean, I've been really, really good at this lately because lots of good things have been happening. And as good things happen, it's like, oh shit, this is going to go away. Or is this real? Are you being tricked? You don't want to feel stupid. The storyline. And I mean, so I try to be mindful of the fact that these are just, monkey brain, like you referenced, and that it's okay. It's okay to have whatever thoughts come out. But definitely, I think that my mind, at least, is very judgmental of the positive as well. And it's interesting. Anyways.
Well, I think one thing that comes to mind is you've got two separate experiences going on here. You're saying, one, I'm having a positive experience, but again, it's your own mind that's projecting fear-based thoughts about that thing. So it's not the feeling itself. I think it's your mind, your ego poking in and being like, well, that's not gonna last, right? So I feel like human beings do struggle against positive experiences when there's an underlying belief that they don't deserve it or it's not going to last. But going back to everything in this universe is impermanent. The good times don't last, and neither do the shitty ones. So
Absolutely.
it again goes back to just this radical acceptance and presence of what is in this moment. And if right now I'm feeling grief or loneliness, then I just sit with that and I experience it fully, and then I let it pass. And then I'm in neutral and then maybe there's a positive experience and I get to sit and enjoy that, but I don't attach myself to it, because if I attach myself to it, guess what? That's going to dissolve too. And now I've created myself to feel sad again. So it's almost like
Mm-hmm.
this mission to stay sort of neutral,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
not to not feel. I don't mean neutral in terms of don't feel good and don't feel bad. It's just accepting everything as it is and as it comes, gracefully letting things go that are good and gracefully accepting things that feel bad. And that's how you can just stay centered and peaceful instead of attaching yourself to suffering.
I absolutely agree with everything you said. Especially like, clarifying that you mean neutrality, not indifference.
Right.
Like that's huge. Um, at least in my experience, that's
Yeah.
huge. I wish that I wouldn't keep forgetting what I'm trying. Like,
It's okay. My ex-boyfriend used to say that I had early onset Alzheimer's, so like I'm right there with you, sister. My brain is just Swiss
that
cheese.
that makes me feel so much better. Yeah, I always used to say I have a memory of a goldfish.
Yeah, it's just like,
Um,
what was I doing thinking of?
yeah, it's like, okay, I like I just had a thought and then it disappeared. Which I mean, I guess I'm getting really, really good at letting go of my thoughts.
There you go.
That's what
You're
I'll say.
already a
I'll just frame it
master.
like that.
Yeah, you've mastered the art of letting go of everything.
um, so Becca, before I let you go, can you let me know where my listeners can find you?
Absolutely. So, folks, you can, my Instagram handle is at Becca_Switzer, SWITZER. You can find my stuff there. I have a sales training channel, which is Roof Sales Master. I actually teach roofing contractors how to scale their businesses, but I do drop a lot of life lessons and stuff on there too. So soon I'm going to create a channel and maybe write a book. I'm working on that stuff. But for the meantime, you can find me on Facebook, Becca Switzer, and at Becca_Switzer on Instagram.
That is fantastic. And just for so I follow you on Instagram. I don't know if you know that, but I follow
Yeah,
you on Instagram,
I think
and I've never
you.
even noticed the sales stuff. So so definitely worth the follow in my opinion. And then that way you guys can keep up to date on the wonderful things that she has coming down the pipeline.
Yes.
So thank you so much for joining me today, Becca. It has been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Anything you want to add before we go?
I think that one thing I would add is for anybody, and this is what I said to Andre's audience as well, just remember that as you're going through this life, there's always more to be revealed. So when you're in a moment, whether it's good or bad, or you don't see the full picture or whatever, something that's constantly brought me a ton of peace is just understanding that there's more behind the curtain that I haven't seen yet. And so just be patient and curious about your life experience and see where it goes. Like the universe is constantly orchestrating things that you have no idea who or what is going to enter the equation for you. So there's always more to be revealed. You can rest on that.
Absolutely. Yes. Remember the farmer.
That's
Thank you.
right.
Thank you so much.
That's right. Absolutely.
And to my audience, I love you guys. Bye.
Thank you, Kara.